Today on the show, I'm answering a viewer email all about buying a business that requires a license. Is it a good idea? What are the pros and cons? What do I think? And what can we do to mitigate the problems that almost certainly may appear for you? Stay tuned.
I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses while controlling risk. So, if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So, be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win.
All right, welcome everyone. And let me kick things off by reading Eric's email that he sent over to me. So I'll put it up here on the screen. He says, "Hey, David, thank you very much for all the great content you put out. I really enjoy getting your take on all things business." Thanks, Eric. Thanks for being part of the audience. I had a quick question I was hoping you'd be able to weigh in on or make a future video addressing. I've been looking at a couple of businesses for sale in the mechanical trades, such as HVAC, plumbing, or electrical, and I keep coming back to the worry of not being licensed in these trades. I hear people talk online all the time about buying a plumbing business with little background in plumbing and just focusing on the business side of it while I assume they employ someone who is licensed and they can do the work or pull the permits under that license. But this seems pretty risky to me. I'm a licensed builder in Michigan, so I'm familiar with the concept of a company having a qualifying officer that allows the business to do the work and pull the permits. But I would like to hear your opinion on the risk of relying that heavily on an employee. Any insight would be greatly appreciated. Thanks. Well, Eric, thank you very much for this email. I think it's great. And I also think that it's really fantastic that you are, in fact, a licensed person yourself, and that this is the thing that you are worried about. Because it sort of gives a bit of an insight into the fact that somebody who at least tangentially can appreciate the issue of the license is putting this front and center as a concern. So before I get into my pro con list, I want to have a discussion about something else that appeared in Eric's email. He said that he was a licensed builder in Michigan, right? And I'm not going to pick on Michigan or anything, but here's what's important is really important is when you are listening to online content about anything to do with someone talking about licenses, be very aware that every jurisdiction out there has different rules, right? And so the rules around licenses of various sorts in Michigan are going to be different than the licenses around various businesses, or the license about how to get a or the rules about getting a license in New Jersey or in some place in Canada. They're all going to be different, right? And so you can really get down in some rabbit holes of listening to people talk about their experience and their advice and what they would do and what they would tell you to do, and their lived experience and their reality of licensing in their jurisdiction could be completely different from your state, province, wherever you happen to be. So there was a really great conversation I'd like to direct people to. That happened recently over on the 21 Hats podcast. Lauren Feldman and a few other regulars over there from Lauren's panel interviewed Rich Jordan, who, along with a partner, I believe, bought a plumbing business in New Jersey and then bought an HVAC business in New Hampshire. Now, what was interesting in that particular podcast, and we'll have a link floating to it here somewhere. What was interesting about that particular podcast is Rich got into some of these jurisdictional differences. So he talked about how in New Jersey, it was required that the license holder own some portion of the business. So they actually had to take on the licensed person and make them part owner of the business. And then the same rule did not hold in New Hampshire. It was a different regime there. And this is what is so key is you have to understand what's going on. Now, when I started working with American clients, remember I live in Canada. When I started working with American clients years ago, and I first ran into dealing with my first clients that had these licensed businesses, I thought it was quite strange, because here where I live in Canada, businesses don't hold licenses at all, right? And so the way it works here is that the business doesn't have a license; it's the individual plumber that holds a license, right? So a plumber is responsible for the work that they're doing, and they individually hold licenses. So this question of having an owner who qualifies to hold a license just like doesn't apply here. But again, there are other different rules here, like such as the transferability of skills, and a plumber in one province may not be able to work in another province unless they qualify in certain ways. So, so this is the number one thing. You got to understand the regime and rules about how this stuff works in your jurisdiction, and realize that if you cross a line on a map, the whole thing can change. So, let's get into the pros and cons. So, I've got a list here, and a lot of these things are just the normal reasons to buy a business, right? You got an established operation, revenue continuity, access to an industry. You can leverage expertise. So if you buy a business and you do not own the license, and you have to hire somebody who is of sufficient qualification and experience to have that license, typically people are saying like a master level license. Well, then you necessarily would tie in a person, I would hope, with a great degree of industry experience, who could then teach you like a lot of the stuff you need to know about running that kind of business, right? Like I would just imagine, I don't know how long it takes to do certain things in a plumbing business. I don't know, realistically what the timeframes are for all kinds of, uh, you know, permits and inspections and all the kinds of stuff that might go into a plumbing business. So having somebody on my team who is of that caliber and that experience would help me be able to better plan out like my cash flow forecast. Like if I said I want to increase leads by 20% and my close rate will be a certain amount, what will the impact be on cash flow? And that person will be able to tell me, hey, given the timelines for permits and the timelines for doing the work and the timeline for waiting for the city inspector and then when we get paid, this is how long it would take. So that could be a net positive, is that you're going to have that great, informative person. Um, would it be an even bigger advantage if I had all that knowledge and experience myself? Maybe, right? One of the issues with technicians owning businesses, is that the technician can tend to get drawn into the work. And so you have that issue of working on a business versus working in a business. So I know I've got a family member who owns an auto repair business, and they have been in this for like decades. And one of the things that they said to me was, "Hey, one of my biggest liabilities is the fact that I'm a licensed auto mechanic, and there's always the temptation to get back there and turn a wrench." But he understands that's not where he adds the best value. And so, likewise, if somebody's sick and you own the business and you hold the license, the temptation is going to be to like go fill in their role for the day. Meanwhile, the higher value activities perhaps that the owner should be doing to grow the business go ignored, right? So let's get back to my list. Um, Moat. So does it really provide a moat? A lot of people think if it's a licensed business, then this somehow has a competitive moat. It keeps people from competing with you. Um, I question that, and I'm going to get into this in a little bit again when we talk about recessions. But certainly, not just anyone can go do plumbing services as a business, but that doesn't mean not just anyone can go do plumbing. Okay, and then last, Amazon proof. So people are like, well, you can't deliver. Amazon will never be able to deliver plumbing services or HVAC services, but I don't know if maybe there are not already people trying to Uberify these kinds of services, right? So, why do people need the middleman? This is probably what some IT person is thinking, and there's probably already platforms out there like this. I just haven't researched it. But if you have a whole field of plumbers that are qualified to do work, could they not bid for jobs on some kind of platform, right? Like it could happen. So here are my points against buying these businesses if you do not hold a license. Number one is pretty obvious. It's the one that Eric mentioned. It's the dependence on the key employee, right? So, if you have to have that person ups and quits, like basically that individual employee holds a huge amount of leverage over you as the business owner. And so, like, how would you ever combat this? Right? How and the only way that I can think of to combat it would be through redundancy. So now we're going to talk about a licensed trade business which is of sufficient size that you don't have one sort of master level technician, but you've got three. So that if one of them quit, you could just like move everything over to the other one. And so now we're not really talking about the smallest of businesses. We need a certain minimum economic size here. We need a certain number of bodies to make this a viable thing. And then the second item on my list was retention challenge, which leads into the key person risk. Increased cost. The licensed employee might command a higher salary or require additional benefits. So, in that Rich Jordan interview on 21 Hats that I mentioned, he actually talks about how that partner he has in New Jersey, who owns a small sliver of the company, now earns a salary higher than he ever earned before, at right with benefits and all this kind of stuff. And so the question then is if Rich himself was the licensed plumber and didn't need that guy, would his business be more profitable because he wouldn't have that high a labor cost? The answer would be yes, right? Because he would be paying whatever the going rate is for plumbers, and you wouldn't necessarily have to sweeten the offer to that key person by offering the higher salary. Um, Regulatory risk. What if you own this business in a certain state and then all of a sudden there was a bunch of problems with these non-licensed owner businesses, and then the state changed the rules and said, we're going to adopt a rule like New Jersey has. We're going to require part ownership by someone who actually holds the license. Well, it's going to cause you to have to reformat your business. You're going to then have to get a partner real quick, right? You may not want to do that. um, Limited control. You could feel like you don't control as much what's going on. Licensing transferability issues. So you're going to jump through hoops to buy one of these businesses. And that means that when it comes time for you to exit the business, you are equally going to be reliant upon finding someone who's going to ignore all the possible downsides of buying a business for which they don't hold a license, perhaps, in order to create that added demand. So, is there a long track record of unlicensed people buying these businesses? I don't know. I really never heard of it until the last couple of years. Um, I think like it may be kind of a new thing, right? So if forever and a day only licensed plumbers have been buying plumbing companies, and now all of a sudden we've got this influx of sort of search fund driven or PE inspired or you know podcast listening inspired people saying, "Oh, I'm going to go buy one of those licensed businesses, even though I don't hold a license." What if the trend doesn't continue, right? And so the market for these businesses could change over time if fewer and fewer non-licensed people decide that they're willing to go through the challenges that Eric is describing, right, in buying one of these license required businesses. Um, so if there are fewer buyers, this leads me to another point. Could then the value of these businesses be impacted? Right now, they're hot, they're popular, it's the cool thing, right? And so when I listen to what the kind of multiples people are paying for these businesses, what are essentially, for the most part, asset light service businesses, and people are pushing the multiples to like 3x SDE on very small businesses, uh, like, it doesn't make sense to me. Um, and a lot of these people take comfort in this idea that somehow these businesses are recession proof. I've heard more than one person say, I'm buying a plumbing business because it's recession proof. Plumbing is always going to break. Yeah. So here's the issue with that. Um, I have lived through several business cycles. I've seen many, downturns in the economy. I have some high school friends who are tradespeople, and I run into them every once in a while. And so over the course of my life, I've been at holiday parties and summer campfires and all this kind of stuff where I run into some of these people. And of course, my first question to everybody is, "How's business?" Right? Like, tell me what's going on. And so here's the remarkable thing that many people don't think through. In times of booming economies, when money is cheap, so like over the past couple of years, right? Whether it's, artificially created by COVID stimulus or not, but we've had this, boom in the economy by the availability of cheap capital. Interest rates were low for quite a while. Um, People will then build things like, let's build a 30-story building. Let's build a big condo project. Let's do this. Let's do that. Right. And so tradespeople get tied up in those projects. There's plumbing in those buildings. And so when the economy goes into recession, people don't want to do those big projects. What happens to the plumbers? So so if you just imagine the population of plumbers, many of them are over there doing the new construction, and then the economy goes down, there's fewer starts of these big projects. Those plumbers still have plumbing skills. What's their backup plan if they don't have a new construction project? Well, it's to get into service work, right? And so now you have this expansion of available labor in the service side of the industry, right? And so what's that going to do to pricing? What's it like, because any one of those people that holds the appropriate license, they can just fire up their own plumbing company. They can just go put an ad online. And so a lot of these people that are paying top dollar for one of these trades businesses, the idea is often based upon the idea of growth, price increases, et cetera, sort of that private equity playbook, right? And so then there's a downturn in the economy and you're trying to raise prices while other people are coming in who are selling their own personal time and may, for cash necessity reasons, be willing to underbid everyone just to get jobs. Certainly, there is going to be an increase in competition in a recessionary market. Furthermore, when people lose their jobs, right? Cash becomes very precious to people when they don't have a job. So you get your IT guy who owns a house, loses his job for whatever reason, right? There's a recession, he loses his job, and now plumbing breaks at the house. So while it's true that you have to be licensed to be in the plumbing business, you can certainly waste days of your own time trying to figure out your own plumbing. And in fact, there's actually companies out there encouraging this. You can do it, we can help, right? And as a guy who used to own apartment buildings and has wasted countless weekends trying to figure out plumbing stuff before I really understood the value of my own time, yeah, there definitely is a substitution that can happen out there where people can just undertake this stuff on their own, and it isn't just their own. So, yesterday I was with my son and I went over to my sister's house, helped her move a few pieces of furniture in her home. And as you might well imagine, of course, there are all kinds of people that are helping each other out with these kinds of handyman projects within families, within friends, etc. So there definitely is an opportunity for demand destruction in the plumbing trade or any skilled trade if there is a recession. Um, the license issue, I mentioned this earlier, represents a point of friction in the market, making it harder to transact in these businesses. And I kind of mentioned that one before. Now, let's talk about the way that I suggested that you get around dependency. So, if you have a larger company and you have more than one person able to hold the license, that gives you options. It makes you less dependent on one key employee. I have had many meetings over the last year with people that are thinking about paying for really small companies. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, the owner holds the license and they are the longtime tradesperson. And then there's like two journeymen and one apprentice, and another person who's just like a labor helper, right? And here's the problem with a business of that size. Um, Last year, I went to Cleveland to attend a small business conference, and John Wilson was one of the hosts. Now, John Wilson owns a plumbing business that has gotten into other HVAC trades as well. And he's also the host of a podcast called Owned and Operated with Jack Carr. And so, if you're interested in these kinds of businesses and you're interested in growing them, you might want to tune into that podcast. But here's what was very interesting in the visit to John Wilson's new headquarters at the time. They were just moving into it, is there was a discussion about, like labor resources. Like, John, you're growing your business, you're expanding your business. Where do you find all the plumbers? And he started to share some of his secrets that I'm repeating here. Sorry, John. He started to share some of his secrets about how he gets new plumbers. And so basically, he said, we recruit from the small companies that aren't able to offer the same degree of sophistication or opportunities for bonuses, commissions, et cetera, that we can. So if you buy that company where there's like three technicians and a master, and then the master's the seller. So now you got to find a new mastered person to hold the license for you. And now you've got three or four people. Like, John Wilson's you're in his crosshairs, right? He's coming after your technicians. And guys like that, like John has full-time on staff recruiters who drive around looking for service vans that they can like go start a conversation with those technicians when they stop for coffee break at a gas station somewhere, right? And so it is totally possible that a third or two-thirds of your company could be hired away in one day, right? So not only are you facing the concentration risk of depending on one person to hold the license for you, you then run the risk in a hot labor market of having a bigger company come and just scoop up a good chunk of your employment, of your employees. And if the labor market is really tough and the bigger companies are offering better opportunities to those skilled tradespeople, how are you going to compete for that? Right. So I guess at the end of the day, my final advice, and if you disagree with this, put comments down below. My advice would be that the only way that this makes sense is if you are buying a business that is large enough that it kind of meets the definition of like real business, not just, qualified guy with some helpers, right? So you're probably looking for a business that has, I don't know, 10, a dozen frontline people going out there doing work so that you could support having a couple of people at least that would qualify to hold a license. And so now we're talking about a much larger operation than what many sort of main street operations would look like. Um, and those businesses are going to look very different than the small ones. And the issue with a lot of these kinds of trade businesses as well is that that bigger business with a dozen employees could have almost the same profitability as the business with one main technician and a couple of helpers. And it's because as you grow, you get those middle layers of management and you have to start, layering on the expenses in a big way. And so people get attracted to these really small businesses because they seem to have really high profit margins, right? They seem to have a really high SDE or EBITDA margin. And it's because the owner is essentially doing all the work of not only the license holding top technician tradesperson, but like all the middle management, all the C-level functions of the business. That person's doing it all. And so more of the sales revenue as a percentage of revenue can fall to the bottom, making them look really juicy, when, there's a lot of stuff left to replace there. And, if you've gone through this and you've bought one of these businesses, I'd love to hear your comments. Please put them down below. And if you enjoyed the video, please, tell us so by putting a comment down below. We really like that. And with that, we'll say see you later. If you're thinking about buying a business of any kind and you want to learn more about it and seriously examine the opportunity and how you realistically price these things, then you'll want to check out the teachings and the tools available at businessbuyeradvantage.com in the online training program. Um, the Let me tell a quick story. Help somebody look at a business just like this about 6 months ago, and it was basically priced for perfection. What that business had was about a dozen vehicles. And what the buyer was not considering, for example, was the CapEx required to maintain and replace the fleet of vehicles. And so I showed him through the tool that is in that Business Buyer Advantage program that if he did the deal he was contemplating, he would basically not be able to pay himself because, of course, the pricing of the business was based upon SDE. SDE does not take into account depreciation and just the number of vehicles in the fleet, the amount of investment every year that would be required to turn over that fleet, or the amount of new expense that would be acquired. For example, if you leased trucks, like if you just started to do a leasing program with someone, it would have the same impact basically. The business wasn't nearly as profitable as he thought, and it had nothing to do with the operations, the pricing, the margins, etc. It had to do with the capex, which was hidden by the way the business was being presented. You will not fall victim to those kinds of hiccups if you are a Business Buyer Advantage student. Good. All right. Well, with that, we'll say see you later, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses? Easy! Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I've prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.